Welcome back. We're now going to do Lecture 3 of our video series, and we're going to build on what we talked about in Lecture 2, namely the dynamic environment. What do you do with all that fancy stuff that we just talked about? Well, specifically, we're going to talk about scenario building. Okay? So, what is scenario building? You know, they talked about it briefly in our textbook in the last lecture, but they didn't really tell you what it was, how you do it, or what the point is. So, scenario building is designed to generate several possibly shocking, inspiring, or absurd even, images of a potential future reality based on observable trends. Okay? So, for scenario building exercise, we're going to make you step out of your normal boundaries as a manager, okay, and push you to maybe start thinking more like a writer of historical fiction. Okay, that's what we do in scenario building. You take facts, you take things that you know, and then you blend them a little bit with fantasy. Okay, so how do you generate a scenario? Well, you start off, you kind of specify your reality under study, namely your model or ontology and also those of your competition. You kind of blend them in such a way to provide kind of a reality under study. And then you generate a list of variables. You select key and pivot variables. Don't worry, we're going to talk about that. Then you go ahead and you conduct many scenarios. You write your narratives for many scenarios. And you basically make a recommendation. So let me write those steps out so it'll be a little bit easier to follow. Okay. So first of all, you have to generate variables. Intuitively, you all probably can generate variables just by thinking a little bit. Okay. You know, what might or might not be in a given reality. However, sometimes we have writer's blocks, and we don't necessarily think outside the box. That's where these different aspects of the dynamic environment can come in useful. Once you've already generated your variable, it's a good idea to go back and check. Well, did I think about this? Did I think about that? What about this? What about that? That's a nice little checkbox, or a checklist. We're also going to talk about pest and pastel analysis during this lecture, and that's another way to help you generate variables. Okay? So once you've got your list of variables, you select your variables. And you select what we call key variables. And you select pivot variables. Key variables basically say, hey, we know this is going to happen, and we know it's important. Pivot variables, on the other hand, say, I don't know if that's going to happen, but if it does, I probably need to pay attention. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, I'll tell you how to select key and pivot variables in just a minute. Then you generate your mini scenarios. I'll tell you how to create and generate many scenarios in a minute. Then you combine the scenarios. Then you write the scenarios. And then, most importantly, this is what you get paid the big bucks to do, make a recommendation or advise. You know, the thing about scenario building, you know, it's so easy to just make a recommendation, right? But you have to remember, the people that you're working for don't want your opinion. even though you're going to wind up giving it to them. Scenario building is kind of a pseudoscientific methodology. You're able to take possibly what you already know and reify or make it concrete in such a way that someone maybe from a more technical background can appreciate, and it makes it look like you went through the steps to come up with a very thoughtful recommendation instead of just blurting something out in a meeting, right? It shows how it can also show how you came up with a potential course of action, and of course sometimes legitimately you just don't know what to do, and scenario building is a practical way to possibly come up with some alternate future scenarios or visions. Now, this sounds intimidating. Trust me, it's not. Okay, we all do scenario building. You think about when you're nervous about something and you lay awake at night kicking the sheets thinking, man, what do I do? Well, I know this thing happened, and what if I did this? And what if I did that? And what if I did this other thing? That's scenario building. You're already doing it. Okay. Now what we need to do is give you kind of the pseudoscientific methodology that you can use to impress your boss or client or whoever. Okay. So we're going to wrap up this particular video. In the next section, we're going to talk about pest analysis or pastel analysis. That's a different way to generate variables. It's a little bit more mainstream than the dynamic environment stuff that we already talked about. And then we'll actually get into the meat and potatoes of scenario building.